Okay, so I'm back with Michael from Conflict Radio, and we are going to resume this really amazing information that he had to share after he met this lady who claimed to be Amy Eskridge. And so, after the first meeting in early May, there was a 2 week lag before a second meeting. So, before we talk about the second meeting, you want to tell us after the first meeting, the next 2 weeks, what happened in the interim?
It's kind of surreal looking back at it now, because obviously after the first meeting, I I think I had sent you a text about it. I'm not really sure, but it was more like, did that really happen? Is that something that actually happened to me? Is somebody just messing with me? And you're doing a lot of second guessing. Maybe after a week goes by, you're like, was that even real? you know and so there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of what's going to happen next. I assumed there was going to be a second meeting, but I was never guaranteed a second meeting. And then finally the second meeting happened.
And you took us to the location where the second meeting happened, and we did a recording of
Yep.
the circumstances surrounding the second meeting, and we're going to play that for the audience now. So enjoy. So we're here in Huntsville. This is the second time you met with Amy. So yeah, walk us through what happened.
Okay, so we're in town Madison here. I got a call on the Uber app to come to Starters. I came here, parked literally probably in this exact spot, if not one or two over. I was sitting here for a couple minutes. I was figuring somebody was going to come out of here into the car. And then a black SUV pulled up pretty much right where this car is here. Amy got out of the passenger seat. My window was down. That's when she walked over. She said, "You ready to go?" I was like, let's go. She's like, "You got to ride with me." Hop in the back. And then I told her, I needed to move the car. I was going to park it. I didn't want to leave it here. So then I moved it over there, and it sat there for 3 days till I got back to pick it up.
Okay, and you left your wallet.
I had to leave my wallet, keys, and phone and everything in the car. I couldn't take anything with me.
Okay, so
And she had mentioned specifically, like when we were on our way, I guess it was about an hour and a half till we got to the field, that I couldn't take the cards because of the chips.
I see. Okay, so the car's left here. You drive up to the field, and it's all your valuables are left in the car. And so, what happened after you got back from the field?
I got dropped off about a half mile. It was probably about a mile and a half from here, a half mile from my house. She told me I had to just walk the rest of the way for some reason, and I just went home instead of coming all the way to the car because it was faster. So I don't know if she dropped me off over that way because she knew that's where I lived, or if she was just thinking it's just a mile and a half. It's no big deal. And I just decided to go home instead of come all this way to get the car. And that my wife was out of town at her mother's, so I couldn't actually get back to pick up my car. I didn't have my wallet, phone, anything.
Wow.
And honestly, that was the longest 3 days of my life, sitting in the apartment then, waiting for my wife to get home.
So you're literally stranded, without keys, without wallet.
Yeah, I mean, I could have walked down here,
right?
But I was dealing with the whole. I mean, it was a crazy encounter. That was an unbelievable experience, and I honestly didn't feel the need to leave the house at all. I just wanted to wait there until my wife got home.
Right, and the driver of the car, he didn't get out at all, or
he never said a word. He never said a word. I think when I first got in, I had said hello, and then he had said hello, and that was it. He'd never said a word. They never talked to each other. Nothing. We got in. She was like, "All right, let's go." And then if you take a right at that stop sign up here, you literally go. It's maybe a half mile down that road, and that's where you jump on the interstate. And then we went south of Huntsville, south through Decatur, and then I couldn't even tell you where we were, out in the country of Alabama, just driving.
And how long did you drive for?
It was probably about an hour and a half.
round trip?
No, one just to get there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
But I don't think we were that far from the base, because you have to go west, and so it's probably like 30 minutes just to cross the bridge
mhm.
to get across the river in Decatur from here, 20 minutes, something like that, and then like another hour from there, going back east,
Okay.
probably to get south of the arsenal somewhere.
Okay. So you probably traveled what, about 80 miles?
Round trip, I'd say about 80 miles.
80 miles. Okay.
Yeah.
And so maybe now, do you want to talk about what you saw when you were at the field?
Now let's go back to the sit down.
Okay,
We'll
so we
talk
can
about it there.
talk about that at the sit
Yeah.
down. All right, so this is the location where Michael was picked up by Amy the second time,
Second time.
and then taken to a field where he saw the orbs, and his car was left here for 3 days with his valuables in there, and he had to wait for his wife to return to get a ride back.
Yeah. I mean, it's only like a mile. I guess I
Yeah.
could have walked it, but
Right.
you know,
Okay. But okay.
I was fine sitting at home.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
In that clip, I mean, Amy first approached you and said, "Are you in or are you out?"
Yeah. I
So
said I'm here.
yeah.
I said I'm here. And she was like, get in.
So what
She's
did
like,
yeah.
leave everything, get in. And I did. I asked if I could bring my cigarettes. I remember asking if I could bring my cigarettes, and she
Mm-hmm.
said that she just kind of smiled. She thought that was kind of funny. She was like, whatever. She's like, just get in. So I had to move my car and stuff because I didn't want to leave my car exactly. We talked about that in the video, but that was an interesting evening.
Now, one of the things that really kind of like struck me when you told me about that meeting, and how she instructed you to leave behind your phone, wallet, keys, and all of that, was that JP's described the same thing when he's gone on some of his missions, that often, as a standard security procedure, that they make the personnel leave their personal effects behind
Yeah.
in the car or wherever. And that just struck me as like, wow, this is exactly the same thing that JP goes through when he's been doing missions.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about JP is we've got hundreds of guys that are down there that are doing the kind of stuff that JP is doing. It's not just him. I mean, he's probably not doing it as much as these guys are now, but there are guys down there that are doing this stuff every day, and I think we're going to start hearing more and more from them. So I mean, that'll be interesting too, and when we start, because there's a lot of JPs. There's probably hundreds of them all over the country.
Right.
So we encourage them to come on out and talk about it.
Yeah.
Get the okay. If you're working at Green Mountain and Amy's your boss, go talk to her and say, hey, can you mind if I get in touch with Dr. Sala or Michael over here or whatever, and start talking. Don't be afraid to come out and say something.
Yeah. That'd be great. So she took you to this location, 45 minutes, an hour and a half away, and then you start seeing what? Why don't you describe what you saw when you were taken there?
That was strange. I'd never really seen anything like that before in my life. We just started talking, and she was asking me how things had been. Like if I'd noticed anybody following me or anything like that. That's pretty much how the conversation started. And then obviously she told me about that there were 8 forces of nature during the first meeting, but the second meeting's when we really got into it. But there were she would start describing to me, and it wasn't until we were talking about the sixth force that the orbs started forming. She was telling me about the Higgs field stuff first, and there wasn't anything going on. We were just kind of just sitting out in the middle of nowhere, just sitting on the dirt out in the field, and it really got interesting when she started talking about the sixth force, and that's when she would wave her hands, and orbs would form, like literally out of nothing. like it'd be like a pencil point, and it would just grow to like the size of a beach ball, and some would, not all of them did. Some of them would grow a little bit, and then they get small again and disappear, and then some of them would grow and move around, and then you know uh, get small and disappear again, and some of them would interact with each other. It was a strange thing. That was going on for like 15 minutes. I mean, while we were there talking, we were probably sitting in that field for 2-3 hours.
Okay, so you're 2-3 hours in the field,
Yeah,
and then these points of light start appearing, and they expand into beach
yeah,
ball size orbs.
yeah. They were orbs. They were blue. They were blue orbs. There weren't any that were different colors. They were different sizes, and sometimes like in the middle of them, you could almost tell which ones are which just because they were the same color, but they had like different forms. If that makes sense, like towards the center, it's hard to explain. It's weird, but you could they were individualized. They didn't all look the same. They were all the same color, but they didn't all look the same. Is what I'm saying. Like you could tell there were different ones,
Okay, so
and you could feel it. You could literally feel it.
that's interesting. So we're not talking about technology per se. We're talking about something that's highly individual, which leads to the next question, which is that Amy talked to you about the Stargate transferring consciousness into these orbs.
Yeah, they were literally forming the orbs with the Stargate and then putting the consciousness inside of them.
Okay, so what exactly was the Stargate doing in putting that consciousness in there?
Some kind of matter transference. That has to do with the seventh force. It's just it. Basically, the way I understand it is it goes into you have somebody like JP, say, or a soldier, or volunteer, or sometimes I think children, uh, and they're just laying down or whatever, and or sitting, or I didn't really ask if they're laying down or sitting, or what their bodily positions were, but they're transferred. Their consciousness is transferred into what she called the memory substrate, and that is like what I was talking about. And see, I'm probably jumping all ahead of you on the stuff here, but one of the reasons why I got into doing conflict radio was because I had a quantum jumping experience, and it was very surreal, and I was but the problem with it is that I was stuck in what I called at the time the in between, where I was in between realities. I was in between dimensions, and I was trying to figure out which dimension was the right one to for me, and I was going in and out of different dimensions, but they weren't the right one. Kind of like Quantum Leap, or the show Sliders. If you ever seen Sliders,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Except there's an in between, and that's how I described it. It was an in between, but she described it as, she calls it the memory substrate. Is what she calls it. Once you're in there, you can go from there pretty much into anything or anyone you want to. Or that's the eighth force. You could do that without the technology, but the seventh force, you need the technology to do it. It's weird. The eighth force is pretty much consciousness itself, and I know we're way ahead of where you want to be,
Okay.
so I should probably shut up and
Yeah, so
let you get
maybe
back on
now we
track.
should talk about those 8 forces, because you described Amy telling you that there were an additional 4 forces to the 4 known in the standard model. So why don't
Yeah,
you just walk us through exactly what she was talking about?
we didn't talk about the fifth force very long. She said it's very boring. She said there's really not much to it. It's just it's pretty much a bridge to get to the sixth. Is It has to do with the Higgs field, and and all that kind of stuff. But she didn't really get into it. She said it's just a boring force.
but it's what provides the mass.
It's the bridge to get to the final three, and even the sixth one's not that interesting to her anymore. The seventh and eighth of the big ones.
Okay, and so the sixth. So why don't you describe what the sixth is?
The sixth is anti-gravity. It's a force.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's literally a force. And she told me she had the mathematics completely solved. That you know they're able to do it just with machines.
Right.
You know that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
But the seventh and eighth forces are where things really got interesting for her.
Well, as far as the sixth force is concerned, anti-gravity is we know the Thomas Townsend Brown effect, where if you have high voltage electrostatics, then you're going to have this kind of like anti-gravity effect, and it's just described in that loose way as an effect. But what we're talking about with this sixth force is that actually there's a law here. It's not an effect. It's actually a law,
Yeah.
and that there's an equation governing the generation of gravity and probably relating how electromagnetic fields are related to the amount of anti-gravity that's generated, or something along those lines.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with like angles of laser angles and things like that she was telling me about, like the angles of the lasers has to be exactly precise, and that it takes a lot of power. But they're able to pull that power right from the ether. She held it in her hand, and she said the amount of air that I can cup in my hand is enough energy to blow up the entire planet, like Death Star destroy the planet. Just in the air, in the cup of her hand, is literally how she explained it to me.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard others talking about 0 point energy and
Ashton Forbes talks about it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, many have talked about 0 point energy and how much there is stored in just very small amounts of space. Okay, so let's get into the seventh force now, which is the mind matter transference and Stargates.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about, being able to take consciousness, use the Stargate to take consciousness, put it into a memory substrate, and then from there transfer it into a target. That I guess however they set it up to work. She didn't tell me how it works.
Okay, so transfer consciousness into a memory into a memory
substrate, which is what I describe as the in between. From there, you can go to different dimensions. You could go to different beings, and you can go to different times.
Interesting. So
it's everything all at once.
Okay. So how could we envisage that? I mean, are we talking about something that's non-local?
The way I could experience from my experience being in it, I think it's whatever your mind wants it to be. If your mind wants it to be a hallway with a bunch of doors to a bunch of different realities and different times, and that's what it is. If your mind wants it to be a computer screen and you're choosing with a mouse what I mean, I don't really know. I think that a lot of the memory substrate has to do with what is the I think the memory substrate is the real reality of things, and from there you could choose. Now this is the eighth force. You could choose where you want to go in time, which dimension you want to go into. The possibilities are endless.
Is it something similar to like the movie Interstellar, where you had the what is it, Thomas McConaughey, the lead actor, where he goes into some fifth dimensional space and he's communicating.
That's the Tesseract, right?
That's the Tesseract.
Isn't that what they called it, the Tesseract?
Yes.
I always thought of that as the what is it, astral travel people call it, the
Akashic Records?
Yeah. Exactly. That sort of thing. The Akashic Records, the Tesseract, memory substrate, whatever you want to call it, that's probably exactly what it is. And that's what he was in Interstellar. Yeah, that's exactly it. Because then you could go from different times. You can, in the bookshelf,
Right,
like
right.
what he was doing,
Exactly.
and then trying to manipulate the time.
Yeah.
But in reality, he could have gone through the bookshelf into anything he wanted to. He could have become the dog. He could have put his consciousness inside his daughter. Now he
Hmm.
might not have been able to do that because he can't master the eighth force, and that's what the eighth force is. It's a total mastery, and see, we're getting ahead of everything because the eighth force is totally mind blowing, and it's just the possibilities are endless. It
Okay, so
really is.
this eighth fundamental force of nature, consciousness, being able to control and manipulate consciousness and move it in and out of memory substrates. So, yeah, just describe a little more about how there that kind of consciousness can be controlled in that way.
Well, you're not controlling consciousness. You're controlling the only consciousness you're controlling is your own. You can go in. You can say, for instance, I think in order to control the eighth force, you have to be. That's like Jesus Christ stuff, man. That's like Buddhist stuff. That's like Elohim stuff. That's stuff that I think for a real human, somebody like me and you, to master the eighth force takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline. It's not something that we're just going to be able to go and master. Uh, I think that eventually humans will evolve, and we can evolve our consciousness into mastering the eighth force ourselves. And but we have to be able to be good about it. I think that it's possible. There are humans out there today that can master the eighth force, and we've seen that in uh, politics and everything else. Where how many different Joe Bidens were there? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but they were all probably the same consciousness. They were all possibly the same person using the eighth force to manipulate that person. And then we start getting into the idea of clones. If I was a human being that was a master of the eighth force, I would assume that I would have to grow up in a family that also mastered the eighth force, and I was taught how to master the eighth force from the time that I was born. Just like we're taught a language. Like, look how great we are at talking and understanding each other because we've been doing it since we were children. If we're able to teach our children mastery of the eighth force from the time that they're born, what they would be able to do as far as power and control over the planet is incredible. And so you're getting into clones and things. So let's just say, for instance, and I'll go back. I'm sorry if I lose anybody, and you feel free to edit out whatever you don't like. But this is where it gets so interesting for me, and it actually like really is interesting for me because you see it every day. Once you start looking into it, you see it every day, everywhere, all over the world. This eighth force, and how there's probably just a small group of families that are controlling everything, and they're doing it using this eighth force, this control of consciousness and this control of reality. You know, let's just say I'm one of these powerful families, and I'm 20 years old or whatever, and I want this is it's fun for me to pretend like I run the world. So let's just say we got somebody like Bill Gates. He creates something, and it's going to be worth a lot of money. I could then take my consciousness and put it into his body using the eighth force. Okay. And now I am Bill Gates. I am living his life, and I am suggesting to him through his. It's kind of like a possession. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If something happens to the real Bill Gates, say he gets cancer or he gets into a car accident, the technology today will allow me to have a clone of him that I could then put my consciousness into to continue that work that I was doing. Just like you have the Queen, say, of England, or the king, or princes, or whatever, that they stay in these powerful positions forever and ever and ever. But for all we know, it's many different bodies that they've gone through, but it's the same consciousness because it's somebody else manipulating that position through the use of the eighth force.
Now, when you are describing the use of the eighth force, what came to mind to me was this book by Edward Bulwer Lytton called Vril, The Coming Race of Man. He described, and this was written in the 1800s, he described going into the inner earth and meeting this race, this inner earth civilization, and they controlled the Vril force, and that enabled them to create their environment or shape their environment however they wanted, and to control animals so that animals would be peaceful, passive, and so forth, and so that they could exercise this control. And it talked about how in the future this race would come to the surface of humanity and take over. Well, this became one of the things that motivated the Thule Society in Germany, which actually funded Hitler and the rise of that kind of whole racial purity idea that the Germans could develop this kind of higher consciousness. So they were trying, it appears, to develop this kind of force, but they failed, I think.
I think they might have, but somebody's been doing it for thousands of years. I truly believe. I really do, and they've mastered it. You know, we always look at things like Disclosure. Steven Spielberg's making a movie, Disclosure, right? But he's deep state, and Disclosure's probably propaganda. That's what they want us to see. Blah 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 blah. Like, and you made a Twitter post this morning that nailed it perfectly with that cab guy. What he had said about it, which was spot on, exactly. Which was very eye opening, because we were just talking about that last night. And but the thing is, you look at something like Star Wars, where they talk about the Force, right? And how, that's George Lucas, that's these guys. Where'd that idea come from? So it's a force that they're using to manipulate reality, right? But you have the good side of the force and then the bad side of the force, right? So wherever there's a bad side of the force, there's probably also a good side of the force too. And that's where I think that maybe the Elohim or some Nordics who master the eighth force are also doing it to help humanity and to help us. And I think that gives us hope. It's not all George Soros's and Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton's. There's a lot of good people out there fighting too. And I think that gives us all hope. It matters.
Okay, so you mentioned the Elohim. Did Amy actually talk about the Elohim and how they've mastered this force?
Yeah, she said that the Elohim. I mean, you could be any kind of Elohim, and you just mastered the eighth force, because from what I understand, that the memory substrate that's just kind of where they live. So and they're higher dimensional. There's the fifth dimensional being. They don't even experience time like we do. We're the only dimension that is time. The third dimension. And we don't even know what that truly measures. What are we truly measuring with time? We don't even know. Nobody can even tell you that. The fifth dimension, all they kind of see, I believe, is frequencies and whatnot. Like when we're at the Dead Children's Playground yesterday, how you said you felt that dread feeling that you feel when you're in a haunted location, like that gut feeling you just get in your gut that tells you that's a frequency that's been at that location for a long time.
Let me just pause you there so that we can actually show that clip, or show the photo that we took of the dead children's playground. And yeah,
Okay.
there definitely was a feeling, a vibe there that was like, I felt immediately that it was like, wow, this is associated with death. That I could feel that there were like ghost entities there.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's pretty. We just happened to be driving through there, and I was like, "Let me take you to this place and check this out." And sure enough, and we were actually watching a kid, and his mom. She was bringing him to the playground to play, and he started walking down to the playground, and he just stopped. He was like, and then just turned right back around and went to his mom, and he wanted nothing to do with going down there. And remember, he stayed right next to her the entire time. She walked down there with him, and he just was not interested in playing at that playground at all. And then they wound up leaving. I think they were leaving as we were leaving.
Okay,
He
so
never even played. But that's that feeling I'm talking about, like that frequency is always going to be there. There's something about that location that's created a frequency, and that frequency is there regardless of what time we're there. We could be there at any time, but that frequency is the same. And the Elohim can see that. They can see that frequency. They can recognize that frequency. And I'm obviously with any kind of frequency, but I'm just pointing this out as an example because we happen to be there. But that frequency is always going to be there.
so they're also involved in this kind of spiritual warfare with other entities that have mastered this force. So yeah, what was the spiritual warfare that Amy was describing with the Elohim?
Well, I mean, there's good Elohim and there's bad Elohim. I like to think that I like to think that regardless what happens, this is where things start to get negative in your mind as far as what the nature of reality actually is. Because if you have good and bad fifth dimensional beings and they're fighting with each other and manipulating realities and controlling humans and the planet and I mean it's almost kind of scary to think about what the nature of reality really is. But at the same time, I mean, what do we got to do with their battles? You
Mm-hmm,
know?
mm-hmm. Now you mentioned non-local realm being outside of space-time. That was one of the things you wanted to talk about.
That
The
was the memory substrate. I wanted to talk
Okay,
about the memory substrate.
so that was the memory
Yeah,
substrate.
yeah,
So we've already
yeah.
covered
We
that.
covered that already.
Okay. Okay, so these four additional forces that Amy described to you, that they've been suppressed for decades, so that mainstream science only talks about the four standard forces, the four known forces: electromagnetism,
Hmm.
gravity, and strong and weak nuclear force. But these other four forces you've described have been suppressed for decades. So Amy wanted that information out.
Yeah, the United States government has been suppressing it for decades, but I honestly believe that there are portions of society on this planet that have always known about these eight forces and that have been suppressing it from humanity for thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
thousands.
Okay. All right. So you've been taken out to this location. You see the orbs. You have this long conversation with Amy. She describes the four additional forces, and then you come back and you're dropped off. And after that, you start experiencing surveillance by helicopters, vans. You want to talk about that?
Well, it was a helicopter. We were having the conversation in the field, doing the orb stuff, and then that had stopped after a while, and we were talking about the eighth force, and we really got into talking about the eighth force, and we noticed an offspring off in the distance, and she was like, it's time to go, and that's when we hopped in the van and took off, and we went probably about a half mile from my house, but I don't know if she was dropping me off near my house or if she was dropping me off near the car, and my house just happened to be between my car and me at the
I
time.
see.
You know what I mean? She wasn't like, okay, she was like, can you get it from here? I was like, yeah, I got it from here, and that's when I got out. because they wanted to get back on the highway and they didn't want to get too far from the highway. So I just happened to be where I had actually gotten out. It was only about a half-mile walk to my house instead of a mile and a half walk to my car. So I just went home, and then I stayed at the house for like 3 days. My wife was at a wedding actually in in South Carolina, I believe, and that's when that's when the attack started happening to me.
Okay, and so you've got surveillance, you've got attacks happening, and and it also affected your Uber driving. I mean, this was where it became really.
I was home for 3 days. I got the car, and as soon as I we'll get in it. As soon as I turned my Uber app on to work again, which wasn't until the next day after I got my car, I did one ride, and then my whole Uber account just shut down.
And we've
and
got a
and,
screenshot
and
of
we
that.
can talk about that. I've driven for this company firm. They've taken my money. I had like $300 in the account that they haven't released. They keep saying, this really pisses me off because I've driven with them for a long time, and I understand that it probably looks like somebody was manipulating the account because Amy was getting me through the Uber app somehow, and maybe that's how, maybe they were just trying to shut down her ability to get in touch with me when I was just randomly out there working. I mean, maybe they figured that out somehow, and that's why they shut it down. But every time I keep talking to Uber customer support, hey, I need to get my money, and they're like, well, you've been deactivated for violating our community guidelines. The same bullshit stuff that YouTube tells you. When they take your video down, they don't ever give you a reason. You can appeal this in the app. If you feel that we've reached this in error, you can appeal it from the app, but then you go to log into the app and it's account locked. And then they'll say, well, your account's locked because your account's deactivated. And it's just the same thing. I'm like, I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Are you going to give me my money? So we're like, I'm getting ready to file a small claims suit against them to go after that money and this, see how that plays out. But that was really upsetting. That second meeting with Amy, it's so earth shattering as far as the concept of my reality, but it completely destroyed my my current life. You know what I mean? Like my entire life is different. It's going to have to be different because there's no more doing what I've been doing. They've taken that from me. I can't even keep doing that. My wife can't even be at the house. She's in the house. Every time she comes by, she's nauseous. She gets sick. She gets headaches. She's literally throwing up all night long. And I'll tell her, you know, this I told her what happened. She's like, I don't want nothing to do with this. I'm just going to my daughter's. So she's going to her daughter. She's like, I don't want no part of this. Because I told her, I was like, this is what happened. She took me to the car. She took me to the car. We went to Kroger, and now this is, keep in mind, this is right after Amy had dropped me off on the corner. So it's 3 days. I'm pretty much hiding out in my house for like 3 days. I think I'm looking out the windows. I'm like, uh, uh, you can literally feel your skin burning. You know what I mean? Like it literally feels like, like when you're sitting in the sun and you're sitting in the sun for a long time out by the pool or something, and you can just feel the sun and the heat all over you. That's what it feels like, but you're sitting on your couch in your house. You know what I mean? It's really strange, and you get the headaches. I didn't get any of the nausea. There was one night I got nausea real bad, but she couldn't deal with it at all. She couldn't handle it at all. It really affected her differently, and maybe that was something they were trying to do too. Like I'm not really sure, but it complete and it completely changed everything. So my wife gets back after 3 days. I'm complete paranoid mess at this point. You know what I mean? Like what's going on? You know, thinking about all the stuff that I've learned, and I'm researching. I'm doing this all this crazy stuff. I messaged you, told you everything that had gone on. I don't think I heard back from you for like a week. She drives me to the car, and then we go over to Kroger. And as soon as we get out of the car at Kroger, helicopter flies over, and I'm waving at him like this. I'm like, hello, I'm here at Kroger, and my wife just, she thinks I'm joking around, like I'm just kidding. And we get done with Kroger, go back home, unload the car, and as we're walking up to the place, the same helicopter flies over again. I'm like, see, I was like, they're just making, because my wife, she's a brunette, whatever. So I was like, they're probably wondering if you're actually Amy. Maybe they thought, they lost her after that night or whatever, and maybe she thought you'd been here 3 days. She'd been at my house for 3 days or something, and they just wanted to make sure it wasn't her. So that's kind of what I told her. And then we had to go to the AT&T store. That's when the vans were following us all around. I sent you pictures of the vans that were following us all around. And then she's like, I got to get out of here. I'm just going to go to my daughter's. I don't want anything to do with this. And that's when I was like, I gotta work. I gotta go out and work. Bills still have to get paid. And I literally went online, did one ride, and as soon as I ended the ride, dropped somebody off at their house, my entire account shut down.
So this is a critical point in this whole story because this is your main source of income.
Yeah, it's my job.
And that was cut out after a 9-year record, thousands of rides,
over 10,000 rides.
Okay, 10,000 rides over a nine-year period, and you never had a problem with Uber.
Nope.
But after this second meeting with Amy, you had your Uber account closed down, so you couldn't work with them anymore. And also, it meant that Amy couldn't contact you through Uber to request a ride from you so that she could meet you for a third time.
Yeah.
So that's critical because people will say, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Well, you've actually got a screenshot of your Uber account being inaccessible, that you can't enter it.
And then they'll put you through the loop of your account's been deactivated because of violations of community guidelines. You can appeal this in the app.
Yeah.
And then you open up the app, account is locked. I'd be like, but I can't appeal because I'll send you those screenshots too.
But what are the chances of that? I mean, you're talking about a 9-year record, driving with Uber, 5-star ratings, 10,000 rides. You never had a problem, and now you meet Amy Eskridge, and as you said, after the first ride, after 3 days after meeting her, you're locked out of the account. I mean, the chances of that are just infinitesimal.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know what it was. I honestly don't know what it. I mean, Amy somehow was able to manipulate the Uber to where she was able to make it look like she was requesting a ride from me, and was able to get me through the Uber app somehow to the location she wanted me to be at. And I don't know if it's because I didn't have any issues with Uber turning off until I had turned it on and did that first ride. So I don't know if maybe that triggered something. Maybe they saw that I was back on and was like, we gotta shut this down. Maybe she had accessed it somehow. I mean, I don't know what it exactly happened there, but yeah, that was that, and that's very,
Okay, so that's a very important development because it's evidence, and you've got the screenshot. And the second thing is what happened to your wife. I mean, again, just after this second meeting with Amy, your wife starts experiencing nausea and starts throwing up every time she enters the house. Literally. So something was being beamed into your house that affected your wife adversely like that, and that has affected your relationship.
It has, yeah.
And so, again, people say, well, where's the evidence? Well, right there. Your wife got sick every day after entering the house, after this second meeting.
Yeah, it's it's a warfare.
Okay.
I somehow got caught up in this, and there's nothing I could do about it. I'm in it. And then you messaged me back, and that's when I you messaged me back, and I was like, you were like, this amazing story, blah blah blah, and then we started talking. I think I sent you some stuff on the forces after
That's
that,
right. Yeah.
and you were like, I was telling you about these problems I was having with the microwave attacks, and I think I told you about Uber. I had sent you the screenshots of
Mm-hmm.
Uber, and then I was under severe attack at that point, and then you were like, well, do you want me to put this out there? And I was like, just put it out there. Say something, get it out there. You know, let's start this. Let's get it done, because it's not good. They're not just going to stop attacking me. It was pretty apparent that whatever was going on, they were coming after me. And after you did that, which thank you very much, by the way, I know you took a lot of heat for that, and I was sitting there watching you take it, and but they backed off after that,
That was
and it
good.
hasn't been at that level since. I still feel like there's times where my house is under these attacks, but it's only for like 15-20 minutes at a time. Maybe they're just mapping the house or something, or something like that, where seeing who's in it or whatnot, because they could do that. They could,
Right, yeah, and that was really what I found amazing, was that just saying on Twitter, announcing that Amy Eskridge wasn't dead, that the backlash was just huge, and it was like it appeared coordinated. It appeared to be just. I felt believed that it was like web bots, just being unleashed.
yeah, but they weren't. And a lot of these guys, I follow. There's a few of these guys that really went after you that I followed, and that I respected
Mm-hmm.
as a channel, as an account that I followed. I'm not going to name names, but there were a couple. I mean, hello, if we follow each other on X and you criticized him over that post, yeah, I was very disappointed in you, and we'll leave it at that. Like you never even gave, like, how could you talk about how society has lied to us over our entire lives about the history of civilization, and then criticize somebody for coming out and saying something without even giving him a chance to speak his part of the conversation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was like
Like
how dare you
who do you
challenge?
really work for? You know?
Yeah, it was like it was almost like this assumption that Amy Eskridge was dead, and that if you claimed to be in touch or knew someone who was in touch with her,
Mm-hmm.
that somehow you were part of this scam. You were trying to defraud the public, and shame on you. And it was like, as you said, it was like, well, hang on,
Mm-hmm.
we've got information and evidence to release, and at that point, I had just announced that this is what I'm going to do over the next week,
Yeah,
and
and this isn't a new idea of people faking their deaths. This isn't something that me and you just created now, and this has
mm-hmm,
never been heard of before. They talk about it with Charlie Kirk all the time. They
mm-hmm,
talk about it with JFK. I've heard JFK's still alive. You hear
mm-hmm.
about it with Elvis. You hear about it with all of these other different people, and they're never been as viciously attacked as they were when you mentioned Amy Eskridge. Like, what was the disconnect there? That was obviously, it was interference. It was run interference. It was amazing to me that I don't know, that just, it blew my mind, and that's why I decided, uh, you know to go ahead and let's do this in Huntsville. Let's do this. I at least owe you that. You took a lot of
Right,
heat. You
right,
you took
yes.
a lot of heat from off of me for doing that, but in return, you got so much heat yourself. But at the same time, you're getting all of the heat, and I'm like at home finally going, you know.
Yeah, I'm
So
grateful for
so
that.
thanks
That
for
took the
that.
pressure off you, because I mean,
Yeah.
you're telling me this, and I mean, you were, I mean, very emotional when you were describing
Yeah.
what was happening, and losing your job, and your wife leaving, and her throwing up whenever she got into the house,
Yeah.
and you had to kind of like drive at night so that you could sleep in the day, because the night was when they seemed to be like doing the directed energy
Yeah,
weapons.
it's an emotional thing, you know, and it's still something I have to deal with. You know, I've got to clean up all the pieces from this,
Right,
you know.
right.
So
So this is something that is at this point ongoing. I mean, you haven't been able to communicate with Amy ever since your Uber account was kind of like shut down or suspended, and so right now you're leaving Huntsville after being here for 9 years,
yep,
and you didn't have any plans, like going back, say April. You didn't have any plans to
yeah,
leave Huntsville. You were here. You loved it here.
yeah. I've been here a long time. I've built a life here. I've
You
been,
built it,
you know, I've
and now as a consequence of these meetings with Amy and the kind of like what has been released, you have had to leave. You and your
yeah.
wife decided to leave Huntsville.
And it's sad because you know the my wife and I talk about this all the time. You know, where we live now, we've lived there for, you know, it'll be 10 years. I think it's September or something. But we've never lived anywhere longer than where we've been right now. You know, a lot of, you know, and I know a lot of people have lives where they they grow up in the same house, you know, and you know their parents leave them the house, and then they die in that. You know, they've been in that house their whole life, and you know what? That's awesome, great for you. I never had that kind of life. You know what I mean? I had a life where I was bounced around in foster homes and everything else growing up, so it was tough, and you know, to actually have a place that was home, you know, where I've lived at longer than I've lived anywhere in my whole life, it was very special and meant a lot to me, and it's gonna be sad.
Right. Well, you know, the thing here is that a lot of people watching this are going to be asking the question: can this be real? Did you meet Amy Eskridge? Was it really her as opposed to an imposter, someone claiming to be Amy as part of some elaborate hoax or psyop? But the things that you've experienced, you know, your Uber job and your wife being attacked and throwing up at night and the decision to leave, I mean, all of that kind of like leads to the conclusion that this is very real. Because if it was a hoax, why would these things be happening to you?
Well, I I understand that, you know, there's a lot of different things that go on in the world. You know, you have CIA mask programs, and you know people wear masks, and you know clones and lookalikes, and you know, I mean, good God, I mean, how many Bidens were there, right? I mean, they can obviously make more than one of anybody, you know, but yeah, I mean, I have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, maybe, you know, it was not, but yeah, I truly believe it was. It just, all the pieces just fit.
Mhm.
All the pieces just fit. I really do think it was her. If I was never, if I never went through that 3 days with the helicopters and the microwaving and everything else, and the wife throwing, if they had just left me alone, I probably would have just blown it off. You know what I mean? But it was only because of all that that I felt like I had to stop it somehow. You know, like just, I honest, when I told you to post that, I didn't know if I was gonna make it the week. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I I thought I was totally being targeted to be taken out. That's why I was like, just get the information out there, and whatever happens to me happens to me. And then once the information was out there, it stopped, and that surprised me.
Mhm.
That surprised me.
So, what lies ahead for you now? I mean, you're leaving Huntsville. By the time this interview is publicly released, you
Yeah.
would have left Huntsville after living here for 9 years. You've gone somewhere else, and so what are the chances of there being a third meeting or Amy being in touch with you? What do you think the future holds for you?
If there's going to be a third meeting with Amy, it's going to come after disclosure. if she gets in touch with me somehow where I'm going, and I'm not going to release that information. Sorry, y'all. If she gets in touch with me wherever I am and is like, hey, can you just fly in for a couple days or something? Yeah, I probably do that, but I, it'd be great if maybe she'll knock on my door, wherever I am, if she's able to somehow. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, can she just get in a craft and fly right over there? No big deal. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know, but all I know is that that the story's out there. We got the eighth forces to study and look at, and we pay attention to Huntsville. We need to pay attention to what's going on in Huntsville.
Well, I know you've paid a great price for getting this information out there, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I want the audience to kind of feel the kind of pain that you've gone through because of all of this. But you've displayed tremendous courage in putting this information out there, despite everything that's happened. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that you're a fine human being, a truth teller, and really kind of honour your courage in coming forward despite all of the things that have happened.
It's your courage too. I appreciate your courage, and it's not an easy subject. I do want to let people know that I understand that there could be a lot of programming that you've received to where anything that goes against what you perceive to be reality makes you angry and hateful. All I have to say is that if you feel that way about this information, then you need to think about who's really in charge of your emotions.
Well, thank you, Michael, for being on the show, and I hope that we can do this again soon.
Right, and tip your Uber drivers.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.